Hello and welcome to another episode of Releasing Your Inner Dragon with Drake and Marie. My name is Marie. I am one of your hosts. I am a fantasy author and a YouTuber with a channel on fantasy world building. With me, as always, is my co-host Drake.
Hi, I'm Maxwell Alexander Drake, award-winning novelist, write video games and every other medium, and teach writing all over the world.
Today, we are going to go through some readers' questions that we have that don't quite fill out a whole episode, but that we figure we can take a couple of them and address them. Now, if you would like to ask us a question, you are welcome to do so by leaving a comment on this video or contacting us if you're listening to us on podcast on releasingyourinnerdragon@gmail.com. It is in the description of the podcast. While you're there, hit the like button, subscribe, add us to your favorites, share, Let's see what we've got.
And we're always looking for topics. So seriously, a lot of people don't send us topics because I think they're like, well, this isn't a whole show or whatever. And that's fine. I mean, send us ideas. We can decide whether we're going to make a show out of it. We can decide whether we want to do something like this, where we're just going to take 4 or 5 different questions and kind of stick them all together randomly in a podcast or whatever. So, we really want to talk about what you guys want us to talk about. So what you're interested in is what we're interested in. So, take a second, send an email, post a comment. It really would help us out a lot.
And of course, if you do have something that you want us to live edit, we do those as well. Send us 1,000 words or less, and we'll edit you live and on the podcast. Be brave.
Send us 1,000 words or less, and we'll probably get to 100 words of it in an hour.
Not quite that bad. Okay, so
well, the last time I think we got 300 words.
Today we are going to kick off with
one perspective, many characters.
One perspective, many characters. So this was a question from somebody who wanted to know, how do you manage a large cast of characters from a single POV? What's your opinion on it, Drake?
I don't see a difference in multi-POV, single POV, whatever. My hard and fast rule is you're in one head, and it's all about that one person. And so you might have a large cast of characters, but it's still about how so like we look at that first Harry Potter book, we're in one point of view for the entire book. We're only in Harry's. So, as the series grew, sure, we had time that we spent with like Ron or Hermione or whatever. And even some other characters, that I'm not even sure I would have done if I was writing those. Like what was the ditzy girl?
Yeah, and Snape. I would
there was the Snape ones. I forgot, but I was really what popped in my head was the kind of the ditzy girl that was always like flitting about. Luna
Lovegood.
Luna. I knew it had something to do with the moon. Like I don't know if I would have slipped into those. I don't know how much they really added to the story, but let's go keep on that first book. We're introducing Ron, and he's introduced as Harry sees him, as Harry interprets him, as Harry relates to him. Same thing when we get to Hermione. It's always about Harry's perspective. I think what a lot of writers do is they go, oh, no, I know everything about Ron and Hermione, so I need to make sure that the truth is told. The reality is that prose, you're writing if you're writing in a limited POV, which is third person free under discourse or first person, your narrator is an unreliable narrator. And that's a great thing. I mean, literally, it is what you want. And so I don't care what Ron is actually like or what his actual motivations are or whatever. I care how Harry interprets that. And so that's really all it is. It's not falling into the trap of going, oh no, I've got 30 characters and I must tell the truth about every one of them and make sure they understand the depths of the souls of all 30 of these characters. Because you can't even do that. I mean, the realm has 8 POV characters and that's it. You won't get into the souls of any other character because 8 is already kind of pushing the limits, even though it's 20 novels.
I think that there's another aspect to consider here, and that is how do you handle such a large set of characters in terms of the reader keeping track of relationships as well? And I think that to some extent, there's an amount of writer's craft involved in subtly reminding people of the relationship. So in dialogue, don't be afraid to use a title to link people, like have them call each other brother or cousin or something like that, that just reminds the reader of who they are again and why they matter to the POV character and things like that. Because that's one of the things I've found, especially with characters who are really like tertiary characters, but they do have names and they do play a role, right? The readers at like if they haven't seen the character for like a couple of chapters, and then the tertiary character pops up again, they're like, who's this guy again? And they just add a little something, add something in his introduction or in what the POV thinks that just triggers the reader's memory. Like it's, his cousin from 5 baronies over who has I don't know, has a wound from the latest battle or whatever the case. Like just trigger their memories a little bit.
Right. Yeah. And also, just like with narrating characters, there is an absolute maximum limit that readers are going to tolerate. It's the same with your secondary characters. You had said tertiary characters. I don't really include tertiary characters because I don't care if you forget them. They are tertiaries. So if I have, you always have those weird tertiary characters that are memorable. So in the Wheel of Time, you have the one, they need a boat and there happens to be a river boat coming down and they kind of jump on board and he's like, great, you guys involve me. And then that's it. You never see him again until you see him again. And you find out that they ruined his life when they jumped on his boat. Now he's got a new boat. And he's like, no, not you people again. And then they don't see him again for several books. And then they get him and he's lost that boat because of what they did.
Avatar,
and, that became this really cool.
And the cabbage guy.
Huh?
Avatar, the Last Airbender and the cabbage guy. Same principle.
Yeah. So those are fun. But you're not going to forget those because you're going to remind them with the whole, oh, not you guys again. No. So, but those are more. So really what I was thinking here was when we're talking about one perspective, many characters, the characters would be secondary characters. In other words, characters that are important to the story and are going to be fairly regularly a part of the thing. You might go a chapter or two without seeing one, sure, but they're still in it because they are required.
I'll give you an example from Harry Potter since we spoke about it. We have Harry, all right? Then Malfoy is important to the story. Crabbe and Goyle are what I would call tertiary characters.
Yes.
In that case. Because they're important to Malfoy, but, they're like a whole step removed from Harry.
Yeah. But
nonetheless, they are still characters that you should probably just remind the reader now and again that they're attached to Malfoy. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what I mean, like those kinds of characters.
And that happens in the first book. And but those are great examples. Both of those characters do get developed as it has to do with time. If you're writing a 7-novel saga like Harry Potter, eventually Crabbe and Goyle become people. They become more than just 2 goons that work for the bad guy.
Yeah.
But they don't become more than 2 goons in the first book. They're just strong men for the evil guy. That's all they are. They are window dressings. They're cliches. They're shallow, not formed entities because they don't need to be. They're tertiary.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when I was, when you presented me with the question, I'm thinking more like, your Malfoys, your Hermiones, your Rons, your Snapes, your Dumbledores, your McGonagalls, your Hagrids. Who are some other secondary characters in that first book? Obviously, Voldemort.
You'll notice as you list those, if you go back and you read the Harry Potter books again, you'll notice that those professor names are always tied to the class they get. She almost always reminds you that this is the transformation teacher, it's this teacher, it's that teacher, so that you have a memory trigger that you can associate with a name. Because the problem is names are forgettable. You think they're not, but they are.
Right.
So and therefore it's important to lay those foundations with the reader of like, it's this person, it's this person, they do this job, it's this person, they do this job, you know.
Even what I said about the ship captain, you know, he was always still some type of ship captain or transport captain, or he was in transportation in every scene that we get him in every couple of books. So I want to say one time he was even leading a wagon train or something like that, if I remember correctly. So yeah, it's, but there is a limit. I mean, notice I listed what, 7 or 8, maybe 10 characters from that first Harry Potter book that are secondary, and then I ran out.
Yeah.
I mean, because the rest of them start becoming, you know, there was
they blur together.
Well, there was a couple little almost love interests. Like I know there was the little Asian girl, Choi or Chow or whatever her name was, Chang, something like that. But she's really a tertiary character. She's not even a second. She's not in it enough. So you those become very forgettable. All we needed was, I mean, he's a young boy. He's in a school. He lives with a bunch of girls. He's probably going to fancy a lot of them because young boys kind of tend to be that way. And so it's just for realism and you know, all of that. And so it doesn't matter who they are. Now, those characters do become fleshed out as the series goes on. And that's what, so if you're sitting there thinking, like when we talk about Crabbe and Goyle and you're like, oh no, they were people, not in the first book. We're talking about in the first book. So yeah, I mean, there's still a limit though. There's still a limit to the number of secondary characters that you can expect a reader to juggle and keep up with. And really, to me, it's care. They don't, like, you care about those characters that I mentioned. Even Malfoy, you care that he gets his uppance. But you don't care about, I mean, even what's the little Hufflepuff boy that ends up becoming pretty relevant.
And he's not from Hufflepuff, Neville Longbottom.
Neville.
He gets sorted into Gryffindor.
Oh, I thought he was a...
No, the Hufflepuff boy is the one who dies, Cedric Diggory.
No, I know Cedric, but...
No, Neville got sorted into Gryffindor along with Dean, Thomas, Simon, somebody, Ron, Harry. Look, I have a very good memory. I did not actually read the books that much.
I read them when they came out, and I haven't read them since. I was standing in line for them. I mean, I pre-ordered when they started doing that, but I haven't read them since. So yeah, okay. I was thinking that Longbottom was in Hufflepuff, but anyway, it still works. It doesn't matter what house he's in. In the first book, he's pretty much just introduced as this pudgy, nerdy kid because every class has a pudgy, nerdy kid. And so you introduce it as that, and it adds that aspect of realism, but we don't flesh him out until, you know, the books continue on when we have more time. So that would be my thing on that, is you still have to flesh them out. You have to make them minimal. The title thing is an awesome, or the job thing is an awesome suggestion. But you know, that's about it.
All right, next.
But it still is focusing on the character. The POV is all that matters. So it's how the POV sees them and how the POV interacts with them and how the POV is affected by them, not about them. They're never about them. Otherwise, you're writing the wrong story. Yeah.
The attention should be what the POV feels, not what the secondary character feels. Okay, next. You've got a list for this.
You wanted to get into media res. Why don't you introduce what that is?
Okay, so we were asked about starting in media res, whether it's a story or a chapter or whatever. So media res is Latin for in the middle of things, and it literally means starting in a point of action with no backstory behind it. So, for example, I'm staring down the barrel of a gun. Like, that's your opening, you know? Or I get punched in the face.
Pain racked his jaw. Yeah.
Anything like that starts in the middle of action with no explanation for how we got here. And it doesn't have to be, as I said, the story start. I think I've started a few chapters once I've returned to a character, like especially Isabella in Sangwell Chronicles, who is in training, right? So I've started a few of her chapters with like her getting thrown across the floor and stuff like that, because I want to just set up that she's finishing a training session or whatever.
Mhm.
So stuff like that, where you start in the middle of action. Now, it can be an overused thing. Okay, now it is a good trope in some genres, like the noir detective genre is freaking famous for this. And if you're writing noir detective novels, you might want to lean into that trope a fair bit. It fits the genre, and people who read genres expect the tropes the genre is famous for. So,
to me,
but I would say don't overuse it, would be my advice. And I wouldn't often open the first chapter of a book necessarily. But I don't say never, but I wouldn't do it first chapter. Like
that's actually what I was going to say. To me, it's a great tool. I use it all the time. You in one chapter you knock a character out, the next chapter, you're starting in the middle of it. You're starting with him waking up or whatever, and he doesn't know where he's at and everything like that. So it works, and you're going to use it all the time. I think that for the opening of a novel, it does not work really at all, because a lot of people have this vision of how it works in movies. Movies are literally a completely different medium. And plus it's very visual. So the mind gets engaged. Like you talked about opening with staring down a barrel of a gun. We literally talked about a movie that literally started that way. That's the opening scene. But because it's visual, you just get wrapped right up into it. I think it was a bank robbery that was in progress, and the main character's just looking down the robber's gun or something like that. So I think in movies, it gets used even more as the opening moment, because it is that visual medium. And I think that in prose, you haven't bought the reader's loyalty yet, because it is only words.
I think you can do it in prose, but I wouldn't do it in fantasy. Because I tell you what, okay, so you're staring down the barrel of a gun, but now you have to stop and world build to to the reader. What does a gun mean? What world am I in? What am I like? There's too much, whereas let's say you're writing a current day detective novel or whatever, like a non-fantasy genre, I think much easier,
right?
Because you don't have to build an entire world. You can just be like, the cashier faded into the background as the gun barrel dominated my field of vision. Like, okay, we set the scene. We're in a store or a bank or something like that, good enough for the reader to understand, and we can just focus on the character. But in fantasy, how do you world build while you're staring at a gun?
Well, it wouldn't even be that, the mercantilian faded in the background as I stared down the handle of a gizmog. And it's like,
what?
Okay, I don't feel anything. Is a gizmog dangerous? I don't know what that is. Yeah. So that I will agree with. And I am biased because I write, sci-fi fantasy. So I'm sitting there thinking, never start a book in that way. But, I don't write murder mysteries, but you're right. I could definitely see a modern day thing, because you're not explaining anything. You say, I'm staring down the muzzle of a gun. Everybody knows what that is. Everybody knows that's dangerous. Everybody knows, everything about that. So that is true.
It's not generally my genre either, which is, but I mean, I've read, John Grisham and Dick I love Dick Francis. It's a ridiculously guilty pleasure of mine to read Dick Francis, and those novels often start with that. He writes jockeys as the lead in some kind of murder mystery, or he writes, I guess he's dead now. He, wrote way back when, but he was a steeplechase jockey in England. So all of his books feature a jockey who gets involved in a murder mystery, and
fantasy fulfill much.
Well, I mean, he didn't need to fantasy fulfill. To be honest with you, he rode the Queen's horses. Like, I mean,
which may seem really exciting to us, but may not have been very exciting to the dude that was actually riding the horse every day.
It may not have been exciting to him, but he was a very famous jockey back when he rode. And so anyway, so he wrote these books. They're great fun, but they're complete bubblegum, very much formulaic. And a lot of them start in media res.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and again, I think you can get away with that.
Falling off a horse. There's a lot of falling off horses involved.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, and like in Genesis, I do it one time, and I've even read the chapter on this podcast before where it opens up and weird things are happening. You like I have lines, and it was funny when I had first put it out. My beta reader's like, "You can't write like this. What are you doing?" Where it's like he felt his body lean out the window, and it's like that's not what that you don't write it. He just leans out the window. I'm like, well, except for
Actually, I do it in my prologue. In my prologue, I open in media res because I've got the dude falling off the horse right there as the boar. But I'm not doing a lot of world building in that scene, and I'm going to murder the guy at the end of the prologue.
Right.
So,
yep.
Yeah.
All right. Another thing that somebody asked us, and this is going to be probably a quick conversation, but they asked us what the difference is between writing prose and writing for tabletop role-playing games.
Plot. No, seriously, plot. In TTRPG, the most important thing is the plot. Because you don't have to convince people to care about their own characters. They care. Right. They have made the character. They love the character. They love the character more than you, the GM, ever will. Players are attached to their characters. GMs are not. And that's just true.
Yep.
Players are the ones who cry when their characters die. GMs are like, I knocked off another one. So in TTRPG, your primary focus is the plot. It's the world and the plot. Whereas in prose, your primary focus is the character whom you love, and you need to attach the reader to the character.
Yep. 100%. As I always say, one of my Drakeisms, when the character, or connect the character or the reader to the character, and you win the story.
Yep.
That's simple.
If the reader cares, that's it. They'll read to the end.
Yep. They will follow that character through hell and back again because they actually care about the character. They care far less for the plot. They care about how the character deals with the plot because they want that character to survive.
Yeah, which is not to say that they don't care. Like, your plot must still make sense. Like, don't misquote the Sharon. It must still be an engaging plot, but it is far more important that they care about the character. Whereas in TTRPGs, you have to lay out a plot for your characters to get involved in.
Yeah, and that's really what you're kind of selling.
Yeah, and it's much less important that plot be like I've got 14-year-olds in my L5R game getting involved in world-shaking events. Why? Because I want the players involved in what's going on. Because I'm running a role-playing game of collaborative storytelling, not story hour.
Right.
So.
Yep. Yeah, like I said, I knew this was going to be kind of a short one because it's.
Yep.
Other than that, they still both need world building. They both need, everything else that we're going to do with everything else. It's just where you put your focus on. With prose, you have to connect the reader to the character. With role-playing games, you got to connect the reader, which they already have their character. You have to give them a reason. I think so. Let me add this as a seasoned role player for 40 years now. Yeah. I had longer than that. Oh my God, 46 years. I'm so old. No, not 46 years. That would have been 6. I was 9 when I started role playing. So whatever, 43 years. So I'm still old. So I think, one of the things that happens that's a trope, that's a meme now that happens all the time is that you spend all this time as a DM creating this plot, this quest, and then first gaming sessions, the characters go, oh, shiny, and they go off, and they never even go to your months long worth of work. And DMs are always complaining about that. I never really had that issue, and I think it's because I understood that I can't just introduce the thing. And a lot of DMs try to be clever with it. They're like, oh, I'll have a crying woman go running down an alleyway, and that will definitely, they'll have to go investigate that. And the characters are like, so about this merchant over here that's selling the magic items. Let's go talk to him. He's like, well, didn't you see the woman running down the alley? Yeah, but we're gonna go buy some magic items because we got all this money now. And like, so you have to really just like in prose, why you always hear me preaching about you have to, the only job of the opening is to connect with the character. The only job is to make the players care about the quest. Back in my day when everything was module based, it was very, very easy because you would start off with, okay, you guys were hired by a merchant who wants you to go get this thing. And so you find yourself out on the road. You're like there's no organicness to it back in the day. But today, because of storytelling and the evolution, now it's all like, oh, you guys are just people in a thing. And so you still have to make them actually give a crap and want to.
I will say that I never struggled with the whole like ignoring my plot thing, not because I managed to connect the players to the plot or anything like that, but because I never had a plot. I had worlds, and to this day I have worlds, and those worlds
that is your strength.
Hooks, multiple hooks, and then the players go like, I'm gonna talk to that merchant. I'm like, okay, but that merchant's not willing to sell you anything at all whatsoever because he's worried about his wagon. You know where his wagon is? Not here. So if you want him to sell you anything, you're going to go investigate his missing wagon.
Yeah. That's the other thing that I also try to do. I try to do things where it's like, oh, obviously that's going to be the story that he created, but there's this other thing that he kind of mentioned that seems a little bit more shiny, so let's go do that. But in actuality, the shiny thing was the hook. And I did it kind of as this, because that's another thing players will do. And not on purpose. I don't think they do it consciously. I think they go, okay, well, that's the story. That's definitely there. But this seems, I don't know, why did he throw this in there? And it seems interesting. So let's go check this out. And then we'll come back to the story. And then I've used that as my way to go, actually, the other thing was nothing. I didn't create anything for that. Had you gone that way, I would have been really in trouble. But, the shiny thing that seemed like it was just this is obviously only going to take a few minutes and then we're going to get into the big story. So, whatever. So I've done that a few times as well at the beginning of campaigns where it's just like, that's how I got them into the story or whatever.
Yeah. Like, as I say, I tend to just have like whole bunches of, and then look at the only downside of doing a TTRPG like that is if you have what I call sedentary players. If you have players who are like, okay, feed us the story. I'm like, up. I mean, there's hooks. Take a hook. Pick a hook. And they're like, no, we want you to tell us who's hired us. I'm like, yeah, it's your characters. Pick a
go
hook.
Find somebody to hire you. Yeah. There's a job board over there.
Yeah.
You could go read some of them.
Yeah. So it is a little bit of a downside sometimes.
All right. So maybe longer than 5 minutes.
Okay. Next one.
So this one's near and dear to my heart. Including horror or horrific imaging in your story. Not necessarily writing a horror story, because neither one of us write horror stories. However, both of us write pretty horrific crap. I mean, I just wrote something for Magic Falls, a train wreck and blood and gore and people screaming in pain and, all this stuff. So, we're both of us kind of do that thing all the time. So what is your take on why? I guess I should ask, because this is what I get asked all the time, because I do write so graphic when it comes to that. And I'll give my reasons, but why do you write when you go graphic, when you go really horrific? Why do you do it?
Because if I'm going to, like, I've written a battle scene recently for Sangwheel Chronicles, and then like the main character goes through a portal made out of blood, and I made that very icky and very bloody and very horrorful. And the reason why is because if you're going to write a battle scene or a fight scene or whatever, it should the reader should feel the visceral nature of the fight. It shouldn't be something you brush across. It is a terrible scene. It is a terrible experience for the character. It shouldn't be brushed under the rug with pretty language and, there was a fight. You should feel disgusted and horrified by what is happening, in my opinion.
Same reason for me. I want my readers to not enjoy. They enjoy it as in it's entertaining, but they don't enjoy, like, man, that would be a horrible thing to live through. I don't glorify violence.
Exactly.
It is raw, it is nasty, it is brutal, it is, we live in a world that doesn't have, we still have it, but the goal of the modern society is to not have to deal with lawless chaos and death and destruction at every turn. And a lot of us do live those lives. Unfortunately, not every one of us. And, hopefully that's where society will eventually move to. But, again, I've said this before, 20% of humanity is pieces of garbage. So good luck with that. But it's, for me, everything is about emotions, everything. I'm an emotional writer. I think that's the number one thing that I focus on in my writing, and it's why I don't focus so much on necessarily wordiness. I think it's one of the reasons why me and you have coalesced so well in Magic Fall, is because we literally each have strengths that are not anything like the other person's strengths. I mean, we're good at a lot of things that are the same, but my strengths and your strengths are very different. And so I think that really is going to, make this project shine amazingly well. But, that's what I focus on. I'm a very emotional writer. I'm a very emotional person. I wear everything on my sleeve. And so for me, like every scene that I get into, it's always about the emotions of the scene. And that's why I might not necessarily do as much world building or do as much, whatever, because it's always about how does it feel? How does it feel? How does it, how does it affect? I always say it's the why and the effect. Why am I doing this? Which is motivation, emotion, and all of that. And what is the effect that it has on me and the world around me? And I just feel, I feel that's the reason why so many people like my writing style, is because I hardcore focus on the human aspect of everything and not the magical aspect or the whatever. And so, for me, graphic violence, and I am famous for writing graphic violence, which is kind of funny since 80% of my fan base is female. That blew my mind, because when I wrote my first book, I'm just writing for dudes. I'm a dude. I'm writing for dudes. I'm writing what I want to see. And guys like my stuff. The problem is the guys don't read. So the guys that do read me like my stuff, but guys just don't read. And so most of my fans are women. And the funny thing is I have talked to them in the past about that. I'll be like, well, but what about the violence? Because I don't do it often, but when I do it, it's bad. Like, it's very graphic. And they're like, yeah, I probably could do without some of that. But I mean, it really shows the horror of that moment. So it's not like they're reveling in it, but they do appreciate the fact that it's not glorified, that it is something that impacts the character in deep ways.
So that to me is the important thing as well. Like when I'm writing, and I guess that's also an important thing to bear in mind with horror. It's not the events. Like when you get right down to it, what is Pennyworth? It's a clown hiding in the sewers. It's not all that in a bag of chips. You know what I mean?
Really, it's like a demonic spirit, but
Yeah, but but what makes it
because it's an immortal evil creature.
Yeah. What makes it horrifying is the victim's reaction to it. It's the emotion of being horrified. The one Stephen King book that I read that stays with me, there's a doctor on a desert island with a bag of cocaine, and he's amputating parts of himself to eat. And it wasn't about I mean, yes, it's a horrifying thing, but what was horrifying was the thoughts going on in his head. And that was horrifying. And the couple of Dean R. Koontz book I've read, it's been the same thing. It's about the horror of the characters, not the thing itself. Right. When you break down horrors into like their component parts, I mean, Blair Witch Project, it was not, there was nothing there. But the characters were so frightened that it carried across.
Yeah. And I got lucky. So I've watched that movie twice. The first time, so I owned a large computer company and we had a tech center down in a bad part of town. It was a brick building, old. The office that I was working in was windowless and, all brick and everything like that. It was a tiny little office in this tech center. And because I didn't go down there very often because we had a nice, pristine retail shop that, was gorgeous and massive and comfortable and all of that. But I did have a small little office down there when I needed to work down at the tech center. And I watched that movie one night in there by myself at like midnight, and no one else is even in here. So this is like the warehouse district of a city and like whatever. And so because I was alone in a very claustrophobic room in a not great part of town in a midnight and all of this, I really, really, really loved that movie, and I couldn't wait to share it with people. And then the second time I watched it was back at my apartment, which was nice and big TV, and had my friends there, and was watching it at that time and was just like, this is stupid. Like, how was I so sucked into this? And it really had to do with the atmosphere that I watched it in more than anything else. Because it did. The first time, it really impacted me. And then the second time, I couldn't figure out why it impacted me. Because it was just, the shaky cameras. Oh, I'm so scared. And like, you didn't see anything. And so, it was just this mindset.
Yeah. But so I think it's about, like, if you're going to include horror, focus on the character's horror. Like, don't worry too much about the actual horror element. Focus on the character's horror at seeing it and what effect it has on them.
Yeah, and in Klain's second chapter, when he gets in the arena fighting, there's some blood and gore and everything like that. But the most horrific scene is when, he digs his claws into a guy's face and rips off like all of this. He rips out the guy's nose, his cheekbones, his jaw gets ripped away. And I describe what that looks like, with the broken eye sockets and one eye's missing and the other eye kind of falls down into the hole that's left behind and all that. But the scene is really about Klain's horror at what he's seeing. He did it. He literally is the one who caused that damage. And yet the whole scene is him pausing to go, oh my goodness. Like, what have I done? This is, And so I think that's the reason why, even though it's a very graphic and disturbing image that I paint, no one has a problem with it, because you're not focused. I mean, you are focused on obviously all of that, but it's through this, even though he's a beast and an animal and furious and, strong and brutal, it even affects him. And I think that's the reason why people enjoy that scene. Even women enjoy that scene, even though it's probably the most graphic scene that I've ever written in my life, because of the fact that it's about how it affects the character that you're now in love with, the character that you're connected to. And so, it gives this vulnerability and this humanness to this beast that you love and want to see succeed. And I just think it brings you even deeper into the story and deeper into the character. And so I use the graphic, just disgusting, horrific moment to show how it impacts. Again, it's always the why and the effect. Why and the effect. Why and the effect. Not the how and the what. How he ripped off his face and what it looked like and all of that. Sure, I'm going to put all that in there, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is, why did he rip off his face? and the effect that it had on him.
Yeah.
And so that really is it for me. It's, you know, the reason why I use graphic violence the way I do is always because there's no more raw emotion than that. And there's no more visceral, just brutal. Your heart is bare. It's kind of reason why I like writing, you know, pain and tragedy more than I like writing, you know, feel good happiness, is because it just makes you, the reader, feel something. You feel when you're reading my work, not just reading my work.
I do enjoy writing happiness, though. I do.
Oh, like, I do too.
I like giving my characters happy moments and bringing that element of joy in. Like, I'm not a huge fan of pure grimdark.
Right. Neither am I.
Like Joe Abercrombie, I read him, I enjoy him to a certain extent, but sometimes, like, I have to work up to a Joe Abercrombie. I've only
read his Wizard's First Law series, and then I was like, done.
Yeah. And that's the problem. Like, I'm not into that continuous.
Right.
Like, for me, there has to be some joy. There has to be some moments of life. There has to be some hope that I'm going to get out of this. You know, that the character is going to make something happen here.
Yeah, and just to make clear, that's why, and I said earlier in this discussion, why I only do it occasionally. Yeah. But when I do it, I take it to 11.
Yeah. When I'm hurting a character, I am hurting that character.
Right.
Like, they are on the floor.
Right.
But I also give them their moments.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I didn't want people to think that that I'm a grimdark writer, because I definitely am not. Yeah. They're also short, because, you know, growing up in a military school that physical hazing was legal, you know, I'm a former combat Marine. Fights don't last long. Like, they just don't. And so my fights are really quick. There's no elaborate dancing through the halls and the back and forth and the cat and mouse of a, no, we're going to beat the crap out of each other, and one of us is walking away and the other is not. And it's going to take about 30 seconds.
So I will stretch out some fights, but then I'll stretch them out because, you know, one of the characters runs away.
Right. But then you're not in a fight anymore. You're in a chase. Yeah. And I've done that as well. But once the fight, you know, there's that chapter that I've read in here where the Alith character is running away from those 3 rapists, and they corner her in an alley. They think they corner her in an alley, but in actuality, she is a shark and they are minnows. And so the actual fight itself doesn't last very long. But the horror of, you know, because you don't know that you're following, you know, the way I present it is she's the minnow and they're the sharks. And so the horror in that, I stretch out for about 2 pages. There's about 2 pages of them chasing her, and, you know, her getting more and more and more and more and more trapped as the scene goes on. And so you're experiencing, and I had so many beta readers because they did not want to read that scene with me writing it, because they know how visceral I write, and they thought that that's where it was going, you know, because I presented it that way. And they're like, yeah, I almost stopped reading, because I don't want to read you writing 3 guys doing horrible things to a teeny little, you know, chick in an alley. I just don't want to read that. And I was like, that's good, because I don't want to write that. Like, it's not something I'm interested in writing. So I'm glad you continue reading.
I hear people who say, like, rape is something that I get it. I'm never going to write it in my book. In my book, people do not get sexually assaulted. They just freaking don't. I'm sorry.
So I don't mind that. I just don't want to write it. I mean, it's a reality of the world, unfortunately. And so I don't shy away from it. Yeah, but I'm not going to write the actual scene.
I'm not going to write the scene, but I also try not to skim, to write it and skim it.
That's what I mean. I don't do that either.
That you know, I try and avoid the situations that would cause such a thing to come to the fore of my story, because if you're going to write rape, please consider what it does to the victim and write it and you know, include that, because that's the biggest problem with rape scenes. Is writers write this and then just skim over what it does to the the victim of it, and it's like, you understand what's just happened here, right?
Yeah.
It's like the way Wonder Woman treated that dude whose body was taken. I mean, you understand what just happened here, right?
And luckily, TV writers that are on multi-$100 million productions would never do something like this. But having a dude murder his wife accidentally and then just never mention it again. Like it was just, well, I mean, I took out the garbage. So what? I do it every week. Of course, no TV writer working on a, $200 million project would ever write anything like that, because they wouldn't be that horrific of a writer. But yeah. But I mean, it's the same thing. Even like, one of the things that I've pushed you on is Burry sees a kind of horrific scene, and I've been adding that it impacts her for longer than you had it, but we also saw the scene differently. And so
I mean, I've driven past 1 million traffic accidents, and I've seen dead bodies at those traffic accidents, and I'm like, oh, that's sad. And then
right.
Unfortunately,
but this was a little bit more than that, or at least where I expanded it to was a little bit more than that. But to me, mental damage needs to be something that is dealt with. It lingers. It stays with the character until something comes along, until either they work through it or something comes along that's so much bigger that they can't have time to deal with it. But I do love tracking emotional damage. Physical damage bores me. It's one of the reasons why I do tend to write a lot of, in fantasy, because like, oh, he took a dagger to the chest and then he drank a potion, and let's move on to the next chapter where he's perfectly fine. Because I don't want to deal with the fact that now he can't use his right arm at all for the next 6 months because of the damage to, the bones and the fact that his lung was collapsed and all this other stuff. Like, I don't want to deal with that. So I love magic to just magic that away. But emotional damage, I will drag that baggage through the entire story. And it just builds because they get more and more emotionally damaged as they're going through the story. And I do like tracking that.
What I did enjoy doing with Louis in Sangwheel was I gave him a horrifying injury that couldn't immediately be healed. And then when he did eventually heal, it came with scars. And those scars then became a tick for him that he rubs his thumbs along. And it's a constant memory. And it becomes like, it's a physical representation of the emotional damage of the thing that happened that gave him that thing. So, but
that's really the emotional damage lingering. And that's great. That's what I like doing. I have that in that one novella, The Path to Rebirth.
It's nice if you can build into that the physical as well. You know what I mean? Like, because it provides a nice tie, a reminder.
Yep.
But anyway. So, next question.
We got time for one more. So, kind of along the same lines, but instead of horrific elements added in your story, mystery elements added to your story.
So I actually just did this for Magic Fall. It's actually funny, I was looking at the feedback from the various beta readers and so on, and everybody is more attached to Burry than to Lyra, which is fine because of the two characters, she's definitely the more, likable, sympathetic one. But that's why Burry gets a fetch quest adventure, right? She's running around the city trying to get a respirator mask. Lyra gets a mystery, which hooks the reader in, right? And the important thing that I found with building this mystery is I needed to start with the end in mind. Okay, so I needed to have gone all the way through to the end so that I know what the end of the mystery is. And then I needed to go back to the beginning. And the first pass through that I did for the mystery, I was too heavy on. I gave too many pieces too fast. And then I needed to make more time in the story by cutting things out, which we've discussed on a previous podcast. and I needed to put in the clues at a slower rate, kind of drifting them in. Now, it's a very short little mystery because it's only in Act 1. Well, I mean, it carries on, but I mean, the part that's in Act 1 is a short little mystery.
3 chapters or so.
Yeah, 3 chapters. But you still want to start with, like, here is the hook that gets the character in. So why does the character care about the mystery? Start there. Why are they going to investigate? Yeah? Then, what are the clues they need to find? Then, how are they going to find them? And dribble the clues out bit by bit where one leads to another and kind of guide the character along. And then what happens when they reach the concluding point? Mm-hmm. And that's how you do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot to this. You know, we start off Laron as an unlikable character. I mean, he's kind of a rich, snotty kid that's, you know,
it's a bit of a
sad
brat.
because he has everything in the world, but he doesn't know what to do.
Yes.
You know, and it's not that we don't know people like that, but still he's a character. And then, you know, we meet Burry and she's like trying everything she can. She's doing a job she really can't do. She's trying to, you know, worry about the health of her sister and pay for all of that. And she's got all these bills and problems and issues. And then she gets this, you know, government task that is now taking all this stuff.
Jury duty, you know?
Right. So, yeah, jury duty. That's pretty much what it is. It's a very dangerous jury duty.
Jury duty, but with guns.
Yes. Guns and radiation and death and monsters.
Yeah.
So, you know, the murder mystery is more like Laron's save the cat moment, because it is a moment, you know, it is this progression of, oh, look at him, kind of, he actually cares about stuff. Yeah. And so that's really what it does, is it gives us time. But the cool thing about it, and I want to talk about this. This is the cool thing about having dual characters, because you can do things, because the reader is in both. They're the only thing they're in both. So like in this example, Laron overhears this thing, but he doesn't understand what he overhears, and neither does really the reader. But then in Burry's chapter, she sees something that she doesn't understand and never would, but the reader should go, wait a minute, because the reader overheard this thing that doesn't make sense, but then saw this thing that doesn't make sense. And since they're the only piece that's done both, most people are going to be able to kind of go, okay, all right, wait, no, I'm starting to build a picture here that neither of the characters can do individually at that point. Because they don't have, you know, we're giving the reader more information than either of the characters. And so that's really nice about having 2 characters. Now, Burry's not involved on the murder mystery at all. Doesn't know anything about it, doesn't get involved in it, doesn't care about it, doesn't find out about it, has nothing to do with it. But that doesn't mean her story can't stray into it to give the reader, which is the only thing that's real in a story. I say this all the time. Reader's the only thing that's real. Everything else is fake. So it gives the reader information in her chapter about the murder mystery, or not the murder mystery, but the mystery that Laron is looking for.
Now, one of the reasons why mysteries are so often written in first person is because mystery writers, like actual mystery writers, want to limit the information that they give the reader. So they want a single POV because they don't want to give the reader multiple, because they don't want the reader putting it together till the character does, right?
Right.
But the reason why we can do it in ours is because our mystery is not the thing we're writing. Nope. Right? And giving the reader more than the characters now, so that the reader can put this together. It builds tension for the reader, because the reader's like, oh, I see the train. Crap, when is the train going to hit the characters?
Right. You know? Yeah, because what it really is, from a code standpoint, it's Laron's inciting incident. But instead of it being one incident, it's a little innocuous thing that drags him to a little bit bigger thing, that drags him to a little bit bigger thing, that drags him to a point of no return where he can no longer not do the thing. And so it's an inciting incident that we have drug out over 3 chapters, instead of just having it lead up to one thing and then having the one thing be the inciting incident. Luke Skywalker comes home and his parents are crispy critters on the front lawn and the Empire's going to kill him. That's a very, here's the inciting incident. Here's what gets you into the story. Your world is now forever shattered and you can't go back. So with Laron, it's more of a, well, I'm a rich, snotty kid.
And of course, no author would ever, write a multi-million-dollar franchise where they kill the dude's parents and then he never talks about it again.
Even worse. 2 scenes later, a guy dies that he met 15 minutes ago, and it breaks his entire heart and world. Oh no, the old guy that I just met yesterday is dead. I will never survive this.
It's not just modern writers. Hashtag not just modern writers.
Yeah, it's so easy to pick on them though. But yeah, so that's really, from a code standpoint, that's what this is. We're using this mystery as this way to, because again, it's all about selling to me. So it's this believable way to go, wait a minute, you got this snotty-nosed kid that literally doesn't really know much of reality. He's never had to deal with anything. And he's just all of a sudden going to decide to be a hero and save the world.
No.
Or he does something that's like, oh, well, this is easy. I can handle this. This is nothing. And it's like, well, I mean, I already did that. So, I guess one more little step, I'm still safe and warm and it's not that big of a deal. And it's like, oh, well, I've done those. And this one's a little bit risky, but it's still really not that bad. And then it's all of a, and then it's like, well, now I'm the only one. Like there is no one else to do this now. Oh crap. I don't want to do this, but I really have no choice now. And so it was this beautiful, I love that, the mystery that Laron goes through, because it connects you. It's the save the cat. It's the inciting incident, but spread out. And it really does. It's a good, amazing thing that everybody's going to really enjoy reading.
So that's like, if you're going to include a mystery, dribble out the clues, start with the end in mind, learn from read a couple of mystery novels. Like, I know they're a little formulaic, but you can see the clues getting dribbled out, and it'll teach you how to structure a mystery that you want to include. And then remember, if you're writing fantasy and it's just a portion of it, you can build tension with the reader by giving the reader more information. If the mystery is not your story.
Yep.
Is that?
I think that's that.
Okay. Well, if you would like to have your questions answered in our show, hit the comment section, send us a mail, let us know. And otherwise, we will see you soon for another episode of Releasing Your Inner Dragon.
Bye.